Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Angela Camara. I am Shelton JSA's chapter president.
I'm Jessica Reese. I'm Shelton JSA's chapter vice president.
So let's get started. Okay, so each candidate tonight will be following hand signals from Emily Yee. And they will go as follows. 1 2-minute questions will be signaled as
1 minute, 30 seconds, and 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. So we're going to start off with candidate introductions. We have 2 minutes, and we're going to alternate between Democrats and Republicans.
what previous experience or background do you have that most qualifies you to be a member of the Shelton Board of Education? We will start with a Democrat tonight.
Good evening. I'm Kate Kutash. I'm a 40-year teacher in Stratford at the elementary level, and I'm running for my 4th term as a member of the Shelton Board of Education. My husband and I have been Shelton residents for over 20 years, and our daughters Kelly and Sarah are products of the Shelton public school system. When we first moved to Shelton, I quickly became involved in the PTA at Elizabeth Shelton School, but as a working parent, there were limited opportunities how I could become involved. I became the ESS representative to the Board of Education, so I've been attending Board of Education meetings regularly since 1997. I continue to be an active parent as long as my girls were in Shelton Public Schools, including serving as president of the ESS PTA and 3 years as president of the PTA Council. As we neared the end of our public school years, I was approached to run for the Board of Education and ran for my first term in 2009. I really enjoy being a member of the Board of Ed. I find it stimulating and very rewarding. If re-elected, I will be the senior member of my party on the Board of Ed, and I will continue to bring to this position the experiences from my years in the classroom. I think that the Board of Ed is losing a lot of experience with Arlene Lisinski, Faye Pack, and Lynn Apple leaving. We'll really miss their input, but I feel that makes my experience and years on the Board of Ed that much more important. Over the years on the Board of Ed, I have served on many committees. I am currently a member of the Teaching and Learning Committee and chairperson of the Policy Committee. I attend all Finance Committee meetings and have a near 100% attendance rate throughout the years I've been on the board. I have served on negotiation teams for contracts with several unions and was recently elected to serve as secretary of the board. As a teacher, an experienced board member, and as a parent, I feel I can truly understand the concerns of Shelton's teachers, parents, and students, and am a valuable asset to the board.
Thank you.
Now we will move to our first Republican candidate, and they will answer the same question.
Do you want to pick one?
Yep. What previous experience or background do you have that most qualifies you to be a member of the Shelton Board of Education?
Well, you're the first Republican.
Okay. All right. I guess we've solved the question of who's going to go first for the Republicans. I'm Mark Holden, and I'm running for my 4th term, and I'm currently in my 5th year as chairman of the Board of Education. My goal is to continue helping to develop policies and promoting practices to improve our student achievement. We do amazing things with the resources that we have available in Shelton, and the credit for that belongs to our employees and also the people who way back when made a decision that what you know is much more important than who you know. That policy has served us very well, and it's why our students continue to get great outcomes in spite of uncomfortably tight budgets. As many of you know, I bristle at the thought of micromanagement. People perform best when they have the flexibility to accomplish their goals in ways that make sense to them. Last night, my comments about the state budget package led some people to feel that the Board of Apportionment and Taxation would be choosing our employees, and I need to correct that. I'm sorry if I gave people that impression. They will only have commenting ability, but it does make me very uncomfortable that they would be insinuating themselves this way. The Shelton Public School System and the Shelton Board of Education are high-performance teams. Many people have worked for many years to get us where we are, and I want to continue that journey to higher standards of excellence.
Thank you. Now our next Democratic candidate, you have the floor.
Good evening, everybody. First and foremost, thank you so much for the invitation to be here tonight, and welcome. I'm really pleasantly surprised to see so many kids in the audience. Glad to have you here and can't wait to hear some of the questions that you all have for us. My name is Amanda Kilmartin. My friends call me Mandy, so please feel free to do so as well. I'm not a teacher or an administrator by background, but I do bring, I think, some important assets to the board. I'm not from Shelton originally. My dad is a retired commander of the Navy. I went to 8 different schools before graduating from high school, eventually finished my education with a bachelor's degree in human health sciences from Quinnipiac University. My husband and I moved to Shelton about 11 years ago. I have 2 kids currently in the system, one here at Shelton Intermediate in the 7th grade, and one at Booth Hill Elementary in the 3rd grade. Currently, I work as a consultant for an organization called Plaintree, which is an international nonprofit organization that works with hospitals and healthcare facilities to improve the communication between physicians and their patients and their families, to improve both the patient experience as well as clinical outcomes. So on a day-to-day basis, I'm charged with identifying gaps and opportunities for improvement that not only improve the patient experience, but also the clinical outcomes as well. And that sort of strategic, out-of-the-box, problem-solving sort of mentality has allowed me to be successful not only in my career, but has given me what I think is a very strong position coming into the board. Kate mentioned that we're going to be short a couple of very experienced board members this coming season, and their experience and their expertise and their knowledge and their history is certainly invaluable. We also have an opportunity right now to welcome some new eyes and some fresh perspectives.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, our next Republican candidate, you have the floor.
Hello, I'm Ann Gios. I'm running for my first term for Board of Education. Like Mandy, I am not a Shelton native, but my husband and I have resided in Shelton for 9 years. I have a daughter in 3rd grade at Sunnyside Elementary, and I also am not a teacher administrator, but I am a parent, so I'm a teacher in my own way, as we all are as parents. And I'm very involved in the PTO. I am a room parent. I am the yearbook coordinator. I do the website for the PTO. I decorate classroom doors, and I just about any opportunity I can. I love to help out any way I can. I am a graphic designer. I've been self-employed for over 15 years. I've been a graphic designer for over 20 years. So my experience, I am I work with very diverse clients and various budgets, and I'm also a Parks and Recreation Commissioner here in Shelton. I'm also a steering committee member of the Strategic Plan Committee for Shelton Public Schools, and I regularly attend Board of Education meetings. I have been for the past 2.5 years, so I look forward. I feel that being a member of the Board of Education would be a great way to volunteer my time, and I have a vested interest as having a daughter in the school system.
Thank you. And we will now move to our next Democratic candidate.
Thanks. Hi. Thanks all for coming tonight. I could yield at least a minute of my time back to Mandy so that she could finish, but I'm Dave Giuello, and I'm completing my first year on the board, my first term on the board. I'm a scientist by education, and I have been an adjunct professor at UNH and at Quinnipiac. My unique experience that maybe qualifies me to be on the board is I'm the only person here that's ever crawled under the tunnels in all the elementary schools and been on the roofs during roof repairs and remodeling, as I provided consulting services in the area of asbestos and lead and indoor air quality for the schools for more than 20 years. I'm not a native of Shelton. My wife and I moved here in '81, so we've been active in the community. I also serve on our Democratic Town Committee. My big focus is on science and mathematics. I'm a physicist by degree, so I'm really committed to STEM programs and for the advancement in those areas. And I'm committed that our teachers shouldn't have to have fundraisers to buy their supplies. I find that to be quite upsetting. We as a board have an obligation to give our teachers the tools they need to do their job. And I'm committed to see that happens regardless of how the budget works out. Thanks.
Thank you. We will now be hearing from our next Republican candidate.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Junior Statesmen of America for having this program and giving us an opportunity to meet the public. My name is Thomas Minotti. Presently, I live at 246 Aspetuck Trail in the Aspetuck Condominium Association. I've been happily married for 54 years to my wife Nancy, and we have 4 adult children, all of which went through Shelton High School and college and have come back to Shelton to work, live, and raise a family. Presently, we have 8 grandchildren in the Shelton Public School system. 2 have already graduated college, 2 are in college, 2 are in Shelton High School, 3 in Shelton High School and 1 in Perry Hill School. Yes, I have a definite vested interest in the education of the students. Thank you. My background is that I am or have had 38 years of mathematics instruction in the city of Bridgeport. I was a department chairman as well as a director of mathematics responsible for budgeting and professional development along with curriculum development. Presently, I am an adjunct professor at the University of Bridgeport teaching mathematics. I wanted to stay in that realm in order to, again, associate what I learned at the college and bring it back forth to the Board of Education. Presently, I am also vice chairman of the Board of Education and work as a team member with the rest of my colleagues for the betterment of the education of our students here in Shelton. My focus, obviously, is on quality education and for the improvement of student achievement. If re-elected, I want to continue in that vein. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate will be the Democratic candidate.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Wayne Bragg. Thank you all for coming. Nice to see everyone here. I'm going to give you a little bit of background and hopefully show you how it fits in a little bit with what we're here for. My wife Kate and I have lived in Shelton for 30 years and had 2 adult children that both attended the Shelton school systems. I'm currently faculty at the University of Connecticut, own my own consulting business, and former executive at Sikorsky Aircraft. I have an undergraduate degree from Central Connecticut State University in management and an MBA from the University of Connecticut. I'm very fortunate, and I hope not to put you to sleep with this. I've had 2 careers. Currently at UConn, I'm full-time in-residence instructor in the School of Business, where I teach graduate management and accounting across all 3 of the MBA programs at the university. I've also helped deliver specialized business mastery programs for Connecticut State Police, Connecticut Department of Public Health, and UConn's entrepreneurial boot camp for veterans. I love teaching. It's what motivates me. Along the way in my teaching career, I've received a number of business graduate teaching awards and several outstanding professor awards from the executive MBA program. I think it must have been all those A's they got that might have persuaded me. My first career, which I started basically right out of high school, I've held numerous financial positions at Sikorsky Aircraft and Pratt & Whitney Aircraft. I actually started my career as a mailboy right out of high school. At Sikorsky, I was hired to set up their financial planning department, and I left and took an early retirement as controller. I managed the financial planning, capital planning, budget, and performance measurement for the $2 billion business. Collectively, I have about 40 years of experience in accounting and corporate finance, which I think would be a nice addition given our current state of our budget in Connecticut. My community involvement also is very much of an interest to me. I've been a member of the Shelton's Board of Apportionment and Taxation. I was a loan executive to Stratford's Economic Development Task Force, and I'm currently a corporator of Griffin Hospital in Derby. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you. Our next question is for all of the candidates again.
Two more to go.
I'm sorry, my apologies. You have the floor.
Hi, thank you for letting me come here tonight and answer the questions that you're so curious about. My name is Kathy Yolish. I've lived in Shelton for over 50 years, and I've been a teacher for 35 years in grades 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the Shelton school system. I was the recipient of many educational awards, including the Weller, Shelton Walmart Teacher of the Year, finalist in Shelton's Teacher of the Year several times, won many IDEA grants and mini grants, and presently I volunteer at Long Hill School in the 3rd grades. I also do junior achievement, and I serve on the teaching and learning. I am the vice chair of policy, and I try to regularly attend the finance committee meetings. I've been on negotiations and also am probably available for most times when we have hearings. Unfortunately, sometimes they're not the ones we like to go to, expulsion hearings or transportation hearings, but they're usually held during the day, and that's an important part of being a board member if you have the time to serve during the day, because that's when the meetings are. Over the last 2 years, I've been on the board for 8 years, but over the last 2 years, I put in 138 hours of formal Board of Education meetings and over 373 hours for school events, things that we're invited to attend, and it's been over almost 600 hours in total. So I just want to say that I want to continue to be the voice for the Shelton Public School employees, the children, the taxpayers. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was fast.
It's good.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Darlene Serbitter, and being last, I'm going to take liberties because I'm a little bit of everybody down the line. I'm a 40-year veteran teacher. I have the 5th generation of my family going through the Shelton Public Schools, which I'm very proud of because our roots are deep and strong. And I just love teaching and learning. I want our students to be lifelong learners. I want to set an example for that after you get out of school, you can continue giving back and learning. Being on the Board of Ed is definitely a different learning experience from anything that you've had in college or your classes. My background is very deep. I started out with a Bachelor's of Science in Math in elementary ed, Master's, 6 years. I didn't miss anything. I loved learning. I ended up with 2 doctorates, and I did start law school until I got 7. In that time, I worked with 5 different commissioners from the state of Connecticut. I was able to bring several of them here. I was able to bring the Celebration of Excellence program to our Shelton school system. The Celebration of Excellence program recognizes creative teachers who make outstanding programs and projects for kids to enjoy learning and to learn a lot of information and skills and excuse me, to learn a lot of information and skills that they can use later in life. One of the interesting things I did was to have 60 students in one of the very first online classes in the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Our
I don't know, I
next
can
question,
talk forever.
our next
even
question
talk
will
about
go
Hurricane
to
Andrew.
all candidates, starting at the end of the table over there, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. What are the strengths of Shelton Public Schools, and what areas do you think are needing improvement? Whenever you're ready. The other end.
Would you like to start on the end of the table or the middle?
Whoever's ready.
I'm. Do you want to go or you want me to go? Okay. All right. Strengths of our public school, very simply. We have incredible people throughout the district, ranging from our administrators down to our teachers, and even going down into the paras and the tutors, and for that matter, the custodians. Terrific people. Our real weakness or area that needs to be worked on is we do need to have stronger funding and more stable funding. That is a chronic problem for us, and I've seen some improvements in the last year and a half or so. Dr. Couette has done a good job of trying to work with the mayor and the aldermen, and my hope is we'll make some inroads on it, but it takes a while to establish new relationships.
Thank you.
Next in line.
Want me?
I think so.
Go in order down the line.
So, Mr. Holden, to your left. Yes.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay.
I would echo Mark's comments that I think our strengths are definitely our staff, our teachers and staff and administrators. I've seen it firsthand on, having my daughter in school, and I feel that she is in very good hands going forward. I think that is definitely our strength, and the things we have to work on is definitely our funding and budget. But I think our staff and support system, even our family and community is very strong too. So with all of that, I think that's what we have to be very proud of.
Thank you. Next candidate.
Again, I think probably what we're going to hear is echoing of each other, but yes, one of our strengths are our staff, our administrators, all the other employees, which include secretaries. Often secretaries get forgotten about, but they are also part of the strength of the school. Our custodians, and of course the support system that we have that goes along with us. For the weaknesses, I would again reiterate, funding is probably the hardest part of the Board of Education. We don't want to cut programs, we don't want to cut staff. We try to do more, and we expect more so that we could expand the programs, especially like we did this year with the Innovation School here at SIS, and also the open school, open classroom at Perry Hill. We want to continue in that vein. Thank you.
Thank you. Next candidate.
Okay. I also agree that the strength of our system lies in all of the employees, the custodians, the cafeteria workers, all the administrators, especially our leadership. I think we're very blessed this year to have a strong leader who has built a wonderful working relationship with our city officials, and I think that's what has helped us this year in our budgeting times, and also in our requests to have certain things done. The city has been more than willing to help in whatever we have needed. The weaknesses, of course, are funding, and I also think we need more support for teachers in the classroom. I think we need more time for the teachers to collaborate, and I guess I have just 2 seconds, and that's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm back. I'm sorry, I apologize, everybody. I swallowed cross and it went down the wrong pipe. So let's see, back to the strengths and weaknesses of the school system. I agree that the staff is definitely our strength, from the superintendent down to the janitors and across the board. Everyone helps each other out, which is very good. I don't know if you've already said that. I also think one of our strengths in the school system deals with the connection between teachers and students. We have a lot of diverse opportunities for our students to interact with each other, different grade levels. We have opportunities for the gifted to expand and grow. We have opportunities for those students who need remediation to get stronger in their core skills. Our weaknesses, I think we're very typical of every other Board of Ed. We probably have the same weaknesses along the same lines. I don't really see us as having anything that's extraordinarily different. However, it's not really a weakness, but it's something I think we have to really address, is the new technological advances.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Just tell me
Yes, now we'll be starting.
Hi. The things you mentioned are kind of both strengths and weaknesses. In addition to our great staff, which is a strength, we also have the families that support the staff. Board of Ed members go out to a lot of events at the schools, and I have never failed to be at one that isn't very heavily attended by the families. In addition to all the staff that come out to run that, I can't find a staff member missing from most of the buildings when you go out to one of these literacy nights or STEM nights or something like that. In the same way, though, while we have the strength of the families, we don't have enough support from the surrounding community that don't have children in the schools. And we need to enlist more support from the rest of the community. And the second thing that's both a strength and a weakness is we've come a long way with technology since I've been on the board. But again, when I compare it to what I see happening in other districts, we still have a ways to go.
I'm going to echo some of what's already been said. Definitely our strengths, in the 8 years that I've watched my kids come through the schools, we've had excellent teachers, we've had excellent experiences with administrators. I think specifically I'd like to call out our superintendent, Dr. Couette. When we first started, we had a different superintendent, and over the course of the last couple of years, watching him come in and sort of execute his vision and forge relationships that have strengthened our position here in town have been a tremendous asset. So particularly thankful for that. In terms of weaknesses, certainly funding is one of those, but I also see a little bit of a weakness in our communication. To echo what Kate said, we definitely have strong families. I worked with the PTO at Booth Hill School for several years, and we always had really strong sense of family and community there. One of the things in the Fight for Full Day Kindergarten I noticed is that ended up going through because we were able to rally families and parents around that, and I think if we were able to more effectively do that, we would be more effective in our jobs.
Thank you.
Okay, I will echo what has been said, and I think the leadership is the real strength of our system, and the demand by the leadership of excellence across the board, whether it be teachers, administrators, or the rest of the support staff. And I'm going to echo what Amanda said. Communications continues to be a weak point for the board. We failed to rally the community. They did rally the community for full-day kindergarten and literally forced it down the administration, the city administration's throat. And that's the only way things are going to change, is if the community rises up and demands more money for the board. It's not going to happen otherwise.
Thank you. You have the floor.
I'm going to give you a little story about why I think this school system is so strong. My son was in 6th grade. He fell seriously ill. He was in the hospital for almost 180 days. We required a lot of special needs to keep him going through school. He never missed a beat. The outpouring that we received from teachers was absolutely remarkable. I even had teachers step up and take care of his sister when I couldn't get home from work on time. So that's what makes a community strong. It's those kinds of things that I think that really show this school system in a very, very positive way. I just wanted to share that with you. From a weakness standpoint, I'm going to echo a little bit what Mark said. Our budget is not what I would call robust in financial terms. And I think if there's any serious budget cuts at the state level, that's going to be very problematic. I'm very concerned about that. One of the reasons it brought me out to want to do this.
Thank you very much. Our next set of questions will be starting with either a Republican or a Democrat. If you feel so inclined to answer the question, you may do so. We'll have 1 minute to respond to each question. The first question is, in a few weeks, the Board of Education will be preparing the 2018-2019 school budget. What, if any, spending items would you consider reducing in an effort to balance the budget? How will you effectively communicate your priorities to the Mayor and the Board of Aldermen? So, yes. In a few weeks, the Board of Education will be preparing the 2018-2019 school budget. What, if any, spending items would you consider reducing in an effort to balance the budget? How will you effectively communicate your priorities with the Mayor and the Board of Aldermen? Mr. Holden, you have the floor.
Frankly, I would be looking for guidance from our superintendent on the areas that he feels are the most critical to maintain. We are at a point where there are not many things that we can cut that aren't already going to hurt. We're down 10 people this year, and that's a problem. On the financial end of things, on the state per pupil spending list, we're now 4th from the bottom. So there's not a lot of fat in our program. Where we would cut, we would have to figure out where we'll have the least amount of damage. As far as communicating it to the public, I am active on Facebook. A problem is when you have something like full day K, everybody can figure out if it affects them. When it's general budget, people don't know if their teacher is going to get cut.
Thank you. Yes.
I think the key phrase in the question that stuck out at me was, if any. I can't see anywhere we can afford to cut. There are so many things I want to protect. We were talking last night about special ed services and how we can save money by creating other programs within the school system. I really don't think there's any way we can effectively cut anything and maintain a quality school system. And I think that's the message we need to get out, not just to the public, but to City Hall and the Aldermen as well, and the Board of Apportionment and Taxation.
Thank you. Are there any Republican candidates who would like to respond?
Well, first of all, I think that I agree with Kate, and I think we all the board members agree. There's really nothing that we can do without. If anything, we need more. But I guess I think we would work as a team together, and we would start with the core, meaning the children, and then work around that, build around that, which would be the teaching staff, all of their needs, and then when we come out to the outside of that big core, we would have to look at what would have the least impact on the children and on the staff, because, but truthfully, I can't see, I don't really know where else we can come.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in, because I think Kathy's right, and you look at the core, and you look at the cuts that would have the least impact on the students. And I'm going to throw it out because, I'm going to look at administrators. If I've got to make a cut to balance the budget, that's where I'm going to look. Because as I see it, they're not in the classrooms, although they do go to the classrooms and they have a lot of responsibilities. but if I'm going to have to make a cut, that's where I'm going to go to. We added assistant principals. If I've got to cut a teacher or an assistant principal, the teacher's staying and the assistant principal's going.
Thank you. Is there a Republican candidate who would like to respond? You have the floor.
I think the budget year coming up is going to be something that we've never dealt with before. I've been reading a lot from the state information coming out, and it worries me because our kids deserve the best that we can give them. And I was the one that found GoFundMe for our school system. I noticed it first and I brought it to the board's attention, and that really bothered me because taxpayers are paying a lot of money to support our children and our teachers and our schools, and they shouldn't have to do that. I don't know how we are going to be able to meet the needs of our students and the wants equally. Something is going to have to give. I think that this year, the public has not realized that the Board of Aldermen has given over $250,000 extra to help us, another $35,000 to help us with supplies and materials. And I think the communications that are established by our superintendent is helping that.
Thank you. Would a Democratic candidate like to?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. In terms of cuts, I think anybody answer up here or even out there where you're sitting, there is no good place to cut. We all can sort of agree on that. But when your back is against the wall and you have to look at somehow reducing spending, for me, the way that I would approach it would be to look line by line and find those programs where we may be able to come across alternative funding that isn't going to come from the town budget. So opportunities for maybe private partnerships for things like improving facilities or grants that are available out there for specific programs. If we can supplement our resources with alternative methods, then maybe that will spare some other cuts that we have to make. And in terms of communication to the mayor and the aldermen, I think the most effective way to do that is to augment our voice by magnifying it out in the community, whether that's through visiting people at PTO meetings and trying to grab a, form a base, or using social media or press releases or whatever. That's the best way to communicate.
Thank you. Are there any other responses? You have the floor.
Yeah, I'd like to take a little different approach on this. As I said before, I think the budget is very, very thin as it is, and I think many of you know that in terms of per student spending, we are very, very close to the bottom of the list in the state, and I don't think we can sustain any budget impacts very, very easily. My suggestion would be take a very, very strategic, collaborative approach with the city. This city spends over $110 million annually, and I think it's time to really look at this as one big pot of money and get very, very innovative and very, very creative. I agree with what Amanda said. We have to look at every aspect of the city to see if we can't share in this pain a little bit more. So I think there's a much more strategic approach, a much more collaborative approach, and a much more citywide approach that we need to take in order to make this work.
Thank you. Because of time constraints, we're going to move on to the next question.
This question will start with the Democrats to alternate. Computer-based standardized testing has been expanding, taking up the limited resources available in the high school library, thus limiting the availability for classroom teachers. Some of these tests are state mandated, others, like the reading inventory and NWEA, a math test, are self-imposed. Given the limited resources upon which we operate, which district tests could we afford to cut?
I'll jump in first. That's what we have a superintendent for.
That's right.
That's where you go for the answer. I mean, he's our lead educator, and I think everybody on the board would, unless I'm wrong, defer to his recommendation.
Is there a Republican response?
Yes, I'd like to. I believe that there is too much testing in the classroom. I do think it takes up too much time, space, and money. And I think this is an area that we should look at right from evaluating teachers to testing students, and even looking into extra things that are done in special education that may be able to get combined. I know we have to obey the laws, the state and federal laws to meet these needs, but enough is enough. When we need the money for other things, then one test or 2 tests can tell you the same thing about a kid that 6 tests can tell you. So I think that's a good place to start.
Thank you. Yes?
I think we need Tina Henkel here. She's our data management. A personal anecdote. I agree with Darla that there's a lot of testing, and I was just recently in an education setting attempting to form groups and was told X child belongs in this group because we're going by this standardized test. And I'm like, but that's not what I'm seeing. Some kids just don't test well on standardized tests. So I think we'd like to see which tests, if we had to cut them, gave us the best information that we use the most, and then go from there.
I go along with both Kate and Darlisa, but I do have to say that I'm going back 35 years, but I think teachers, we all have that innate ability. We don't look at records right away, and we see these kids coming in, and we can kind of get a picture. And sometimes the testing situation, I mean, there's all kinds of factors that vary into it. Data, we all agree, it's important, but I think that it's time to take a foot back and kind of look at the total kid, because I know for myself, when I took tests, I just froze. As a matter of fact, I took a test, they said I shouldn't be a teacher, I should be a forklift operator or something like that. So I really think that we need to step back a little bit and, okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Because of time constraints, we're just going to move on. This next question will start with the Republican candidate who would like to respond. And again, you have 1 minute. What technological improvements, if any, are needed in our schools?
Mr. Holden?
I'd like to see additional computers in the schools, and I think we still need to do some upgrading of the school computers. Some of the systems in our schools are still pretty old, and so I think that is something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Yep.
I think our tech department has come a long way in responding to problems with our technology. But again, we need the backup, the support of the infrastructure and personnel to respond quickly to technology problems that people are having, to maintain the technology we've got. And again, as Mark said, get more computers out there and reduce the ratio once again.
Yes.
Yes, for the improvement, I would like to see the expansion of technology and also the expansion of our STEAM program. I think that we need a lot more so that the students have a diverse idea of the different types of careers that may be beyond just the academic. Presently, I believe there are exceptional jobs in human resources, in health science, and in technology itself. Okay.
Are there any other Democratic responses? Okay. Yes.
Just quickly, I agree totally with Tom. I think the STEAM program needs to be really deployed across the school at every level. This is not just about going into careers where we deal with science and technology. This is about critical thinking, problem solving, and those kinds of skills really apply to everyone. The careers of the 21st century are very, very different than the careers that I grew up with. And I think we have to make sure that we deploy these skills all the way throughout the entire system.
We're going going to move to our next question, which is also along the lines of technology. Many aspects of school require technology these days. However, some students don't have access. Would you support an initiative to loan Chromebooks or laptops to students in need? Again, starting with the Democrats.
Could you repeat that last part of the question, because I didn't hear it?
Would you support an initiative to loan Chromebooks or laptops to students in need?
I'll take it. As everybody here knows, that technology and access to computers is critical to success in the education system today. So if we do have students who don't have access, then it's our obligation as a board to provide those resources so that there is real equity in their educational opportunity, whether that means loaning them out for a library or having a particular computer lab where they have access to it, you know, outside of regular school hours. That's something that I would absolutely support.
Thank you. Is there a Republican who would like to answer?
I'd just like to say that the mayor did give us this year $250,000 towards the Chromebooks, and I have to say we don't always express our thanks, but many PTA, PTO groups have provided our schools with a lot of the additional resources that we need. And thank goodness for them and all of their fundraisers. We really appreciate them, so I wanted to say that. I think that we would like to, the line item that's always cut first is usually technology and anything with capital improvements. I guess we have to look to the city to see if they would probably bond for them, because we don't upgrade them as much as we should.
Are you done with that question?
Yes, I am.
Actually, if I could address it real quickly.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
thank you. This next question is for all of the candidates. It'll start on this side with the Democrats and just move down the line until the end. You will have 30 seconds to respond to this question. If elected, does your lifestyle allow you to physically attend Board of Ed meetings and school events, or will you require the regular use of Skype? Do you think Board of Education members can effectively participate by using Skype?
Good question.
Okay.
I've already proven by my attendance rate and the number of things I show up at that I am committed to being here for things. I have Skyped into one meeting when I was away, and a quorum was needed for some decisions. That's it.
Well, full disclosure, last night's Board of Ed meeting, I conference called into. I do have a job that requires travel. I do require access to technology to access some of those meetings. However, that does not mean that I'm not committed to being there, or to having a vote, or to having a voice, or to going to the mat when it's necessary to fight for the resources for our kids. So, so the answer is yes, but I don't think that that would hinder me in any way from participation in board activities.
Also, in full disclosure, I have Skyped in and phoned in when I travel. Most of my traveling, however, is personal business, not related to my job any longer. So I attend as often as I can. I do agree that if at all possible, we should be at the board meetings and at the committee meetings. But not to use the technology that's available to us is kind of foolish, and you are able to attend and participate any way you can, and that's the important thing.
Thank you.
My course load this semester, next semester, I don't see any problem attending meetings. My 2 years of the Board of Apportionment and Taxation, I think I missed maybe one meeting, because they just said, if you teach online classes, very comfortable with the technology, and if need be, I have no problem Skyping in. I think it's appropriate.
I have Skyped into a couple of committee meetings over the years. It's an infrequent thing. One time we had a meeting that was going to be happening about 2 hours after I had a procedure for kidney stones. I just wasn't at the beginning here. There are some people who are very effective at participating in meetings with Skype, and for those people, I don't really see a problem.
In my career, I work from home, so my schedule is very flexible. So I fully intend to work around my work schedule to accommodate attending meetings. I mean, I feel as a board member, it's a job, and when you have a job, you have to show up. And so there are times when, like anything, you cannot be there. So I would support the occasional Skype and phoning in, but I fully intend to attend to the best I can.
Thank you.
My schedule has been rearranged, but I have been on the board for about 12 years now, and I don't miss meetings unless I was sick. Basically, I feel that we are accountable. If we are elected by the public to serve on the board, then it's our duty to be here. My schedule does allow me to be here. I am chairman of the Teaching and Learning Committee, and the only time we have not had a meeting is if we didn't have agenda items. I attend the Finance Committee. I am a active member of the Finance Committee.
Thank you.
Well, I think commitment is definitely in my part. And as I said in my introduction, over the last 2 years, I've put in 138 hours of formal Board of Ed meetings, including policy, finance, teaching and learning, and over 375 hours of going to school events. And that doesn't include the time that I spend volunteering in the classroom or when someone calls and asks me to come in and help them. You usually see me in and out. Thank you.
Hi. I have only been on the board for 2 years. In that time, I only had to use the phone once. I have made every single meeting, every single committee meeting, every single suspension or other hearing, special meetings that we have. I'm retired. I'm a widow. And so my time is my own. I do a lot of research. I'm up late at night. I'm available. So I'm here.
Thank you. Our next question will follow the same format we were doing previously, the 1 minute on each side. Whoever would like to answer has the ability to do so. Starting with the Republicans, what are your feelings on adding a student and teacher liaison position to the Board of Education? Yes, sir.
All right. If we were to put that position in, it could not be a voting position because members of the Board of Education must be elected by the general public. It is possible that we could put a student liaison onto the Board of Education to participate in some way in our meetings, but it's something that we would need to look into as far as the actual dynamics of it.
Thank you. The Democrat?
In Stratford, where I teach, there is regularly a representative from both Stratford High School and Bunnell High School as liaisons to the Board of Education, and they give monthly reports to the board of activities at the high schools. I think it's a really great thing to have. We have a very active parent group that's in constant contact with Dr. Collette, and I think maybe soliciting some of their attendance might be beneficial.
Thank you. Is there a Republican? Yes.
I think a teacher and student liaison on the board would be a really good idea. We did talk about that when I first got on the board, but it just didn't get massaged enough to come to fruition. We have a strategic plan that Dr. Collette has implemented, and we could have more input from students on some of those committees. And we also have a special section of our agenda called Highlights. And this would be an opportunity for those students to speak at our board meetings during that section. And of course, I agree with Mark, they can't vote. They were not elected, so they couldn't do that, but they could participate.
Thank you. Is there one last Democratic candidate who would like to answer? I will.
I think it's a terrific idea. I think we heard a couple of times tonight that one of our weaknesses was communication. And when it comes down to it, as a Board of Education, we don't work for the mayor, we don't work for the schools, we really work for the students. And our teachers are there in the trenches with the students on the day-to-day, we rely on their input, oftentimes through the superintendent, but having that kind of communication and that direct interaction with our students and teachers, I think, would be invaluable.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Democratic candidates. You will still have 1 minute to respond. Given the recent terror threats both at home and abroad, would you continue to support domestic and international trips organized by the schools?
I'll jump in, seeing I do a lot of traveling. We live in a global society, and the only way to know about the global society is to travel and to meet people from other countries. And I would certainly encourage our students to travel throughout the country and throughout the world. Learning other cultures and other points of view expands your horizons and is just a wonderful experience.
Thank you. Yes.
I agree with Dave. I think we live in a very diverse society, and traveling is an education all on its own. I do support travel domestically and foreign trips if it's safe. The Department of Security will issue the warnings, and we have to listen to them. Of course, it's a lot of liability for us as a school system when you are leaving our little town of Shelton, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity for students to broaden their horizons and to make new connections, new communications. We live in one world, so I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Democrat? Yes.
I definitely support the travel, having attended Board of Ed meetings, as I previously mentioned, since 1997. I've seen the full range of terrorism in the national viewpoint, and in that period of time, it's been up to our superintendents to pull back permission as needed when the threat level goes very high, and it has been done.
Thank you. Is there a Republican candidate who would like to respond?
I just want to say that I support it. I feel that there are students who would probably not have the opportunity to travel domestically or internationally. So I think, despite the travel threat, the security threats, it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to offer to kids who may not have the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. Our next question, which will start with the Republicans. Would you support funding a student activity transportation fund to support clubs like JSA that travel out of the state for regional conventions? Yes.
The big problem is money. That is one of those things where we talked earlier about how constrained our budget already is. One of the things that unfortunately we lost this year was we had to give up having fan buses for various sports activities. I don't see how that can happen until our funding situation improves. I think it's a great idea, but we just don't have the cash.
Thank you. The Democrat?
When we win the education lottery, I would definitely support it. It's funny this question came up because I was making a note of it for possible comments later, because my kids were chronically the ones that wanted to go on trips, whether it was high school or college, and we had to make some tough decisions whether or not we could afford to send them.
Is there a Republican who would like to respond?
I think that funding should happen if we can afford it, but I also think that in these times we could be creative, and perhaps your JA group could get together with another city's JA group. Maybe we can do some sharing of the funding and come up with some opportunities to do something like that, and then maybe make more friends and have a wider opportunity to have a bigger experience. So think about that.
And one last Democrat.
Well, I think it's all about priorities, and what our first priority has got to be the education of the students. And while the extracurricular activities are great, and I think we all support them, it's a matter of priorities, and you do what you can with the dollars you give them.
Thank you. We will move on to our last question of the evening, starting with Democrats. Would you support reinstating funding to keep the high school library open after school and reestablish a late bus to allow students to get home safely? Is there a Democratic candidate who would like to respond? Yes.
I think that would also answer your question about having technology available to kids too, who can't afford to have it at home. Again, funding pending, that's always the swing point of if we can do anything, these things. The late bus, when it was in existence, my kids used regularly for various activities. I think it's a valuable asset.
Thank you. Is there a Republican who would like to respond?
I'm not sure what your question was.
Would you like me
about
to
reinstating the library? Isn't the library open?
Would you support reinstating funding to keep the high school library open after school and reestablish a late bus to allow students to get home safely after using the library after hours?
If funding were available, you know, it's our priorities though, as Dave said, that we have to look what has the most impact on students. I would support that if we had the money, but maybe we could look into another alternative, like seeking a possible grant for to get the monies to do such a thing. I don't know.
Is there a Democratic response?
Yeah, keeping the library open after school should not be that difficult. The buildings are used for a lot of other activities in the evening, so there are adults present, the custodial staff is there, there's a second shift. I don't know how late the athletic teams practice, but that should be something that we should be able to look at and figure out a schedule. The busing part of it, that becomes a little bit different and more difficult depending upon where the students are. But it may be something that with being creative, we might be able to do something with it.
Thank you, and we will take one last Republican response.
Simply put, the problem with keeping the library open is you need to have the library media specialist present. So that's additional hours of time for them. Again, it's a wonderful idea. The cost is a concern. I do want to jump back to an earlier question real quickly about the idea of loaning laptops to students. In the long-range scheme of things, I see that as probably something that will happen because textbooks will be moving to electronic format, and that should save us money.
Thank you.
We have some time left, and we don't have any more questions. We will move to questions from the audience. These questions may be directed at the candidates in general or at one specific candidate. So if anyone has a question, they may come up to the microphone up there.
Good evening. My name is Eric Keller. I'm a lifelong resident of Shelton. I currently have 2 high schoolers, and probably next year I'll be having a kindergartner go to high school. Congratulations on, first of all, to the folks who use Skype, leverage that technology. I'm an IT professional, and telepresence is a really, really cool thing, and it really is the way of the future. So congratulations to you folks on that. I was hearing a lot of discussion tonight about money, budgets, etc. I was looking at some statistics. It seems to be Shelton maybe pretty much on par with the Connecticut average for spending per student. I don't have the exact number, but I believe it's somewhere north of $15,000 per student. And according to USA Today report like 2 years ago. They gave Connecticut a score of like 82%. And I look at our neighbors like Massachusetts, who spend about $2,000 less per student on average across the state, and they score about 4 percentage points higher than Connecticut. I'm looking for some insight from you folks, as to why that is, what can we do about it. It's kind of an open-ended question, but just if you could share some insight.
Could I ask for clarification? You said you thought that our spending was about average for Connecticut?
According to 2 sources that I've found on the internet, one was USA Today, and that one stated that I think the spending was maybe somewhere around $15,500 per student.
If you check the State Department of Education's it's called the NCEP report, NCEP,
okay,
you will see that our per pupil spending for the last year that was just reported last week was, I believe it was $13,800 and change per student for the last school year. And that was the 4th lowest in the state of Connecticut, 166 out of 169.
Okay, interestingly enough, the number they reported for Massachusetts was in the $13,000 range as well. But yet, still at the same point, okay, if you want to compare apples to apples.
Well, you have different costs of living between different states.
Okay.
And so that is a factor. There are a variety of things that factor into it. And I'm not an expert on what happens in other states. I just know what happens here.
Are there people or studies, people that attend other states who may be doing better than us? Are there any of these activities going on where people, research, what are they doing better than us, and whatnot? I'm just kind of curious about this kind of stuff.
We're ranked pretty highly as a state compared to other states. There are some states that are ranked higher than us.
Yeah, Connecticut is in the top 10, but so is Massachusetts. But the amount of dollars per percentage points of performance of students, I just noticed that Massachusetts was better per dollar, spent. So I'm just, any other feedback from anybody else on this?
For those of you who don't know, I have been a member of the board for a couple of months now. I was appointed to fill in for Arlene, who had to leave to care for a family member. One of the things that I have learned in the short period of time when we're talking about per pupil spending was that there are several nuances involved in calculating that per pupil spend, and it's not always apples to apples. For example, the cost of electricity. If Shelton High School uses LED bulbs and the Derby High School uses your standard traditional bulbs, that could cause a difference in per pupil spend calculation by a significant amount. And you take, transportation costs. Are there buses running on propane? Are they running on diesel? Those all get factored into the per pupil spend and aren't necessarily a very good measurement of the resources that we're providing in the classroom. So I would just add that as a caveat. And also caution you against comparing state to state, because even here within our state, some of our schools, particularly here in Fairfield County, score among the best in the nation. And yet we have schools like Bridgeport that score among the lowest. So to compare, it's hard enough to compare across city lines, let alone state to state.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last note, we try and avoid conversation. So if you want to ask a question that is amazing, and we allow for all of the candidates to answer. So if any other candidate would like to answer this question.
Okay. I would like to piggyback on what Amanda said. You have to realize that Massachusetts is a commonwealth. There are only a small number of states that are governed under commonwealth laws. And so when you do look at their statistics and compare them to Connecticut, it is apples and oranges. They have a whole different set of rules and regulations. And the way they spend their money, as Amanda said, is different than the way we do. But keep in mind, it is a commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions in the audience?
Hi, Elizabeth Condo. Do I have to say where I live, or is this not an Alderman meeting? I'm over on Chamberlain Drive. PTOs, you thanked PTOs for supporting and buying necessary things, but PTOs are consistent of all of us parents who pay taxes, so it's kind of supplementing even more with our money that we raise. So it's a nice thing, but I'd like it to be not a necessary thing. Communication, Chris, Dr. Coulette, you have done so much for this town in communication with the Board of Aldermen and the mayor, so I thank you. I'd be happy to go to a meeting, and I'd like to see that we are listened to by our aldermen. I'm hoping that's a big change that's been happening, because it hasn't been. You know, I'm one of the original cackling hens, and it is a problem that because we're female, we're not listened to, and it has to stop. So I thank you for the efforts that you're putting forth, and everybody representing themselves very beautifully. And you kids have done a great job tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any responses?
Thank you.
As a fellow cackling hen, yes, thank you.
I just would like to ask that all questions forward are in the form of a question and that they are concise. You may respond. Sorry.
If there are no more questions, we want to, Dr. Coulette, do you have to say anything?
Just thank you all
Yeah,
for
that's
doing this.
fine.
The students have been awesome.
Yeah, we want to thank everybody that came tonight, even Mr. Allen's kids for extra credit. We appreciate that.
We have one more question.
Oh, go ahead.
Sir, you have the floor.
John.
Good evening. The first question that I have could be for each member that is running for the board. If the Board of Ed ends the year with a budget surplus, should that amount be expended on the children or be returned to the general fund of the city of Shelton? Number two.
Would you like them to respond to your first question first?
That is fine.
Okay, are there any responses?
I think chronically, when we're reaching the end of a fiscal year, we're predicting what we might have as overages and buying things in advance that we can stockpile for the next year, whether it's copy paper, which is always an issue, or consumable textbooks that need to be replaced each year. As we get to the end of the year, if we see there's going to be an overage, we try and spend it. However, sometimes there are things we can't predict because things don't come in until the last minute and they come in cheaper than expected. And then we're required, as of the end of the year, to return.
You're free to respond in any order. Mr. Holden?
Simply put, we do need to make all of our decisions before the end of June. And so it's impossible to make sure that we spend every last dollar because we don't want to go over by 50 cents, okay? So it's impossible to be certain you've spent every dollar. The other thing that comes into play is 2 budgets ago, we were looking very good in terms of the medical. And so we talked with the mayor and we were able to arrange with him that excess funds from one year would in effect go back to the city and then get passed back to us to fund the additional funds that we would need for the following year. It really depends on what the individual circumstances are at the time. I think that you know, while I'm in favor of expending all available funds for the good of the students, sometimes saving a little bit for next year isn't a bad deal.
Thank you. Yes.
Can I respond to that? Let me tell you how it works in a corporation. You under your budget at the end of the year. You have two choices. You either turn it back into the general fund as you suggest, or it's used to reinvest in other needs to help the corporation along. I think the same principle applies here. I think at the end of the year, we shouldn't be on spend it or lose it mentality. We should be looking to control our expenses, to try to work as efficiently, as effectively as we possibly can. If we underrun our budget at the end of the year, I think the board and Dr. Collette should have the prerogative to reinvest those monies wherever they think the needs are the greatest. So that would be sort of a policy that I think that should be implemented.
Thank you. Are there any other responses?
So you had a second part of your question?
I know I know this board, whomever is elected to the next term, is going to have a severe problem for one account. And that has to do with special education. That figure is rising to a large amount. I know you just spoke about doing things like this, but that one there is going to be a large amount for next year. But I thank you very much for your answers.
I'm not sure what your question was, Judge, but in our presentation last night, it was very eye-opening. While the student population is going down, the number of special education students is going up. Right now, it amounts to about 15% of our population, and it's rising. So we don't have a choice. We have both a legal and a moral obligation to educate all the children of Shelton that attend our schools. So one way or the other, we will have to find the money to educate them. And if the population continues to go up, we'll just have to make adjustments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joello.
Are there any other responses?
Special ed is a chronic problem in that we do our budgeting based on the number of students that we have, and then as the year progresses, more students with special needs move into the district. One of the things we do have that has helped us out is that the state does have the excess cost grant for some reimbursement. It's not a great deal because you have to spend several times what you spend on a typical student, on the special ed student, before you can start to receive a partial reimbursement. But it still does add up to a significant amount of money for us, and you know, so far we've been okay in recent years.
Yes, last night, as Joel pointed out, we had a very eye-opening session and explanation of the special education program. And again, it was brought to our attention that possibility, a lot of our money is spent for outsourcing. And it was brought up that, is there any possibility that we could have possibly expand our programs here at the schools so that we could save the money? A lot of the money is spent on transportation for the outsourcing, plus the fact that with respect to the outsourcing, we're also paying for extra nurses, extra aides, and so forth, which again takes away from our budget. So, as was mentioned, we are looking at possible ways of expanding our programs so we have less outsourcing and we could handle some more of the special students here.
Due to time constraints, we're going to take one last question from one of our students here.
Patiently waiting.
David, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is David. I'm a student at Shelton High School. Can you comment on the recent issues with the cafeteria staff and the insurance benefits being cut?
I'd be happy to comment on that. The cafeteria staff does not work for the Shelton Board of Education. They work for Whitson's. Whitson's is a company who we have hired to manage our cafeteria program for us. Previously, we had Sodexo. Sodexo was running over budget. It was costing the Board of Education to subsidize the program. We could not afford that. When we reached the agreement to hire Whitson's, we did ask them to please consider hiring our existing staff that had been working in our cafeterias, and we also encouraged them to provide medical insurance. They did those things. The unfortunate thing is medical insurance has gone up dramatically in cost in recent years, and they're going to see the brunt of that at this point in time. Hopefully an amicable solution will be worked out. It hasn't happened yet.
Thank you.
We have one other student who wanted to ask a question, so if you'd like to ask that now, you may.
How many points are we getting for a question?
Hi, I'm Maggie. Many of us were wondering, but I'm here to speak for us all. If any of you can think of a realistic way to fix the Shelton High parking lot due to how many inexperienced drivers, including myself, that have to drive in and out of it every day with the many potholes, and with me driving my first car due to having to fix damages that may happen.
Show up at a Board of Aldermen meeting.
Yes.
Bring
We can
friends.
explain that,
Bring
though.
friends.
You know, that's a flip answer.
Yeah.
The city maintains the exterior parts of the schools. The Board of Education is responsible for the interior part of the school. So the grounds and the driveways and those things, those are all the responsibility of the city. They took that away from the Board of Education a number of years ago. So it comes up out of the Highways and Bridges Department. They would be the ones that would fund it. And just as a matter of reference, they return several hundred thousands of dollars every year in unspent funds. So maybe if they would spend some of those funds, we might be able to get the parking lots fixed.
Well, you know where you have to go ahead.
I have a little inquiry to add. Each year, students pay $100 to for this parking spot, and many of us don't know where that $100 goes. So if you were able to comment on that, that would be fantastic.
That goes to security.
Security?
Thanks.
And I think that's it. We're going to conclude our forum. Thank you everyone for attending. Yes?
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.